Hello streamers, this is the sceneend, your stream technician, here with a tutorial on what I'm calling a MicroStinger. A MicroStinger is a stinger transition that covers only part of your screen, like so. This MicroStinger can be used to add a subtle effect to your stream that looks both different and makes your stream feel more defined. Now let's get into the tutorial. Alright, so this is how we're going to set up what I'm labeling a MicroStinger, where the stinger does not cover the entire screen but only a portion of the screen, and then swaps that portion out. Gives a really cool effect for your streams. So let's set this up. Now you can set this up one of two ways. If you have an Updeck or a Stream Deck or some kind of macro software that can swap between scenes, this is a lot simpler. You need less scenes to accomplish the same effect. But if you don't have access to that, you can use a plugin called Advanced Scene Switcher. We're going to show you how to set up both. We're going to start with the Advanced Scene Switcher, and then we'll move on to some kind of macro software such as Updeck or Stream Deck. Alright, to set this up, the first thing you need is the part of your screen that you don't want to be covered by the stinger. For me, we're just going to do a simple stage curtain. I need to add in an aspect ratio. You don't need to do this, but mine is not scaled correctly for my screen. So that's just a simple fix for me. You guys don't need to do that if you have everything set up to the right aspect ratio. I'm going to just make this slightly bigger to cover the screen. That looks good. Now on your second scene, you're going to want to copy the border and put it onto your second scene so it overlaps in the exact same spot. Then when you swap in between scenes, you can see that it doesn't look like I'm swapping scenes here because the border overlay is in the exact same position, exact same size. So it doesn't actually look like I'm swapping scenes right now. Let's add two different display captures. Now this is going to be your main scene. I'm just going to do a simple display capture for the demo. Display 4. And then on this end scene, we're going to want it to switch over to a different display. All right. So now when we're swapping, you can see that I'm swapping because it's two different scenes, but the border stays in the same spot. Now to make the stinger transition between these two scenes, we need to do a little bit of trickery. So the first thing we want to do is we want to duplicate the first scene. I'm just going to name this scene end part 1. So that is when I come from the scene and I'm going to scene end, it hits this first. Then I'm going to duplicate the scene end also. Scene to scene end part 2. So it takes 4 scenes to accomplish this with the Advanced Scene Switcher. Now the magic happens in these two scenes right here. So we're going to add our stinger on here as a media source. Stinger. Just load up the file that you want to use as your stinger. You don't want to loop it and you don't want to close it when it's inactive. And you want to put it under the border. Now you need to copy the stinger so it's the exact same stinger and put it on the other part of the transition. So now when you're on this scene and you want to switch to the end scene, the first scene you're going to hit is the part 1. The stinger is going to activate. It's going to switch to part 2. Then you have your second scene, and then it moves to end scene. So to automate this with the advanced scene switcher, the first thing you want to do is you want to say when screen end part 1 is active, we're going to switch to screen end part 2. And after 2 seconds, that's how long I need to put for this particular stinger. For whatever stinger you're using, this is how long until you hit that full coverage. So we add that, and then once we hit part 2, we're going to want to switch to the end scene after another 2 seconds. For me, for you, you might have to play around with that timing to get it right on the full screen part. Now you want to use cut so it just switches right over, no effects, and this is what it looks like. You start with your first scene, you have your stinger, and there you go. A nice, beautiful transition, and you are on your final scene. Now, that seems like a lot. You've got 4 scenes to accomplish a simple effect. This is a lot simpler when we're using a software such as Updeck or Stream Deck, where you can macro the events that are happening on the scene. So we're going to copy this stinger. We're going to pop it in on our first scene and our last scene. We're going to hide it. And we don't need these 2 scenes for the... Let's turn this. Okay, we're good. All right. So we don't need those 2 extra scenes when we're using a macro. We have our stingers just placed on both scenes. So to accomplish this, let's take a look at the code. All right, so here's the code for this button. We're going to toggle the visibility of the stinger on the first scene and on the second scene. We're going to call a switch between the 2 scenes using a cut transition, but we're going to delay this switch for 2 seconds. Once the scene is switched, we're then going to start turning the visibility of those off again. So we're going to turn it off on the first scene, and we're going to turn it off on the second scene. I have a delay of 4 seconds. That's how long the stinger lasts, so that after the stinger's ended, it can just turn it off on the end scene. So let's see this in action. So here's my transition button. I click it. It's going to activate the stinger, switch scenes, and then turn the stinger off. 2 scenes, nice and simple, nice and clean, cool effect. I'm excited to see what you guys can pull off with this effect. I want to see some cool transitions, some cool micro stingers that add some awesome effects and really stand out in your stream. You can do subtle transitions with this effect. I can't wait to see the amazing scene swaps you pull off using the MicroStinger. Be sure to show off your cool clips of your MicroStinger in our Discord, link in the description below. Feel free to dislike this video, but if you dislike it, please leave a comment as to why you dislike it so that in the future you can get better videos made by the Stream Technician. And remember, be awesome, keep on streaming.